The security guard's hands trembled as he read the note one more time. The paper was soaked from the rain, the ink bleeding, but the words were still clear. "You promised me this 32 years ago." When he looked up at the homeless man standing before him, covered in mud and desperation, he knew this wasn't just another concert crasher. This was something that would change everything André Rieu thought he knew about his past. Before we continue with this incredible story, I'd love to know what city are you listening from and how old are you? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories like this one. The orchestra was performing at its peak. Thousands of people at Chicago's Millennium Park watched as André Rieu conducted when he suddenly stopped. It wasn't a mistake. He simply lowered his baton, looked at the audience, and said into the microphone, "Who did that?" The crowd fell silent. Cameras searched for focus. Two security guards were holding a man barefoot, covered in rain and mud by the side entrance. "Release him," André said firmly. "He tried to rush the stage," answered a security guard. "Release him," repeated the maestro, now louder. The man knelt down. Something fell from his pocket, a crumpled piece of paper. André walked over and picked up the note. He read only one sentence, written with shaking letters. "You promised me this 32 years ago." André's face went pale. He looked at the man and stepped back. "That's not possible." The audience began to murmur. The cameras caught his expression. The maestro, who never interrupted a concert, was completely shaken. André turned to the orchestra and commanded with a broken voice, "Stop everything, nobody plays, total silence." Nobody understood what that note meant. Nobody except André Rieu. Hours before the concert, Chicago was in a festive mood. Millennium Park was packed. American flags waved under the spotlights, and more than 3,000 people waited for the maestro. The live broadcast would be sent to 27 countries. Everything was planned on time. No mistakes allowed. André Rieu stood in the dressing room straightening his jacket in front of the mirror. His assistant adjusted the microphone while he repeated the usual ritual. Absolute silence before he went on stage. But that evening something distracted him. On the table lay an old, yellowed letter. No sender. It had arrived a week earlier without a signature. "You won't recognize me, but I'm coming to watch." He read it again and folded it carefully as if it were dangerous. Pierce, his son and producer, came in hastily. "Father, the TV team is ready. We're starting." André only nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the letter. "Is something wrong?" Pierce asked. "No, just a memory." Outside, the crowd screamed his name. The sound of strings filled the air. The maestro went on stage, greeted the audience with his usual smile, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Among the front rows, something caught his attention. A man standing behind the fence, holding a piece of paper, eyes fixed on him. No security. Not a fan. A look that made him hesitate for a second. Pierce warned through the headset, "Father, camera 3 is open. Smile, please." André smiled, but the discomfort remained. He felt it. That evening would not be just any concert. Someone had returned and he knew exactly who. Timothy, the production manager, walked nervously behind the scenes. He checked his clipboard for the 10th time. Everything had to be perfect. André Rieu concerts were famous for their precision. No improvisation, no deviations, but there was something strange about the atmosphere that evening. "Mr. Timothy," a security guard called via radio, "there's a man at the side entrance. He doesn't have a ticket, but he claims he needs to speak to André Rieu personally." "Send him away," Timothy answered curtly. "We don't have time for fanatics." But the security guard hesitated. "He says he's waited 32 years. Timothy stopped. That sentence had something that made him doubt. "Hold him, I'm coming." On stage, André Rieu began conducting the first notes of the Blue Danube. The orchestra followed perfectly. The violins sang in harmony. The audience was enchanted. But André's gaze wandered to the side entrance where the security guards held the man. The man tried to break free, screaming, "André, you promised it! You promised it!" The audience began to turn around, fascinated by the commotion. André lost his concentration. For the first time in his career, he missed a cue. The orchestra hesitated but recovered quickly. Pierce spoke urgently in his ear. "Father, concentrate. The cameras are on you." But André couldn't take his eyes off the man. There was something familiar about that voice, something that brought him back to a time he had tried to forget. Mrs. Melody, the first violinist, noticed the tension. She leaned toward her neighbor and whispered, "Is everything all right with the maestro? He seems distracted." Her neighbor shrugged. "Maybe he's just tired. He's given 12 concerts this month." But Mrs. Melody wasn't convinced. She had known André for 20 years and had never seen him like this. Behind the scenes, Timothy reached the side entrance. The man was soaked from the rain. His clothes were torn and his face was covered with mud. But his eyes were clear, intense. "Who are you?" Timothy asked. The man looked straight at him. "I'm Garrett Millfield and I need to speak to André Rieu now." Timothy frowned. That name sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it. "Mr. Millfield, this is not an appropriate time. If you want to make an appointment—" "I've waited 32 years," Garrett interrupted him. "I can't wait any longer." There was something in his voice that made Timothy hesitate, a desperation that went beyond that of an ordinary fan. "Wait here," Timothy finally said. "I'll tell the maestro as soon as the concert is over." But Garrett shook his head. "No, it has to be now. He'll understand why." On stage, the Blue Danube ended with a crescendo. The audience burst into applause. André bowed, but his smile was forced. He looked again at the side entrance, and this time his eyes met those of Garrett. Time seemed to stand still. André dropped his baton. He stood motionless, staring at the man he had tried to forget. Pierce spoke urgently in his ear. "Father, Father, what's wrong?" But André didn't hear him. He walked slowly to the edge of the stage, his eyes still fixed on Garrett. The audience fell silent, bewildered by the maestro's unusual behavior. Garrett took a step forward, breaking free. He took a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and held it up. André recognized it immediately. It was the score for Sunrise in Your Eyes, the melody they had written together 32 years ago and never played. "You promised me this 32 years ago," Garrett called out, his voice breaking. André felt his knees weaken. Memories came over him like a wave. Garrett at the conservatory, teaching him how to put emotion into every note. Garrett's wife Rebecca and their daughter Emma laughing in the audience. And then the fire, the theater that went up in flames. The night everything changed. Pierce grabbed his father's arm. "Father, who is that man?" André slowly turned to his son, his eyes moist. "He is the man who taught me how to play," the audience murmured, uncertain about what was happening. The cameras zoomed in on André's face, showing a mixture of shock and emotion. Timothy came hastily on stage. "Maestro, we need to continue the concert. The broadcast is running." But André shook his head. "Stop the broadcast." Timothy stared at him in disbelief. "What?" "I said, stop the broadcast," André repeated, this time with more force. "This is not part of the show." He walked to the microphone and spoke directly to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to see was not planned, but sometimes there are things more important than perfection." The audience was confused. Some began to whisper, others filmed with their phones. André gestured to the security guards. "Bring him to me." Garrett was slowly led to the stage. Each step seemed to last an eternity. When he finally stood before André, they fell into a long silence. "Why now?" André finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Garrett looked at the ground. "Because I can't wait any longer. Because the promise still stands." André closed his eyes. The memories were overwhelming. He saw Garrett again, young and brilliant, the best violinist he had ever known. He remembered the last time they had played together, the evening before the fire. "Garrett," André began, "after that night you disappeared. No one knew where you were. We thought you were—" "I was dead," Garrett interrupted him. "To everyone, including myself. But music wouldn't let me die. It kept me alive, waiting for this day." Mrs. Melody, watching from the orchestra, felt tears welling up. She didn't understand it completely, but she felt the emotional charge of the moment. Pierce tried to intervene. "Father, this is not the right time. We can arrange this later." "No," André said firmly. "This is exactly the right time." He turned to the orchestra. "Mrs. Melody, may I have your second violin?" Mrs. Melody hesitated, but stood up and handed over her instrument. André took it and gave it to Garrett. "Can you still play?" André asked. Garrett looked at the violin. His hands trembled. He put the instrument under his chin and took a deep breath. The first note was hesitant, almost painful, but then came the second and the third. each clearer than the previous. Slowly, a melody began to form. Sunrise in your eyes. The audience held their breath. The music was rough, imperfect, but filled with an emotion that no one could ignore. André took his own violin and began to play along. Together they created a harmony that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. When the last note faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the audience burst into applause. Tears streamed down faces. Strangers hugged each other. Garrett lowered the violin, his face wet with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. André put a hand on his shoulder. "No, Garrett, thank you." The concert was over, but the night was far from over. Behind the scenes, it was chaos. Producers shouted into radios. Camera operators tried to understand what they had just captured. And Pierce walked nervously back and forth. "Father, what have you done?" he cried as soon as André and Garrett entered the dressing room. "The entire broadcast was interrupted. Headquarters is calling non-stop." André ignored him and gestured for Garrett to sit down. "Let them call. This is more important." Timothy came in, his face red with frustration. "Maestro, with all respect, this is a disaster. We have contracts, obligations." "Timothy," André interrupted him calmly, "sometimes there are things bigger than contracts." He turned to Garrett, who sat quietly in the corner, his hands still trembling. "Tell me everything. Where have you been? Why did you come back now?" Garrett looked up, his eyes red. "After the fire. After Rebecca and Emma. I couldn't. Music only reminded me of them. Every concert, every note was a painful memory." André nodded slowly. "I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now." "But why did you disappear without a word?" "Because I thought if I disappeared, the pain would disappear too," Garrett said. "But it didn't. It followed me everywhere. In every city, every country I went to, I heard their voices in the music." Pierce interrupted. "So you've just been running away all these years?" Garrett shook his head. "No, I stayed. I played on streets, in small cafes, everywhere where nobody knew me. But I could never forget what André and I had promised, to play Sunrise in Your Eyes together when it was ready." André frowned. "But it was ready. We had completed the score." "No," Garrett said softly. "The music was complete, but we weren't. I wasn't ready to play it until now." At that moment, the door opened and Mrs. Melody came in. "Maestro, the orchestra wants to know what's happening. Should we continue, or is the concert over?" André thought. He looked at Garrett, then at Pierce and Timothy. "Ask the orchestra to wait another half hour. We're starting again, but this time differently." "Differently?" Timothy asked suspiciously. "What do you mean?" "I want Garrett to play with us as guest soloist." The room exploded in protest. "That's impossible," Timothy shouted. "He's not prepared. He hasn't had rehearsal." "He's been rehearsing for 32 years, André interrupted him. "He knows the music better than anyone." Pierce grabbed his father's arm. "Father, think. This could damage your reputation. He's a vagrant. The audience won't understand." André pulled his arm free. "The audience understands what's real, and what they saw tonight was more real than any concert I've ever given." Garrett stood up, uncertain. "André, I can't do this. My hands are too old, too damaged. I haven't played for an audience in years." André grabbed his shoulders. "You just played for 3,000 people and you were brilliant." Garrett shook his head. "That was different. That was spontaneous, but a full concert is exactly what you need," André finished. "And what I need." Mrs. Melody stepped forward. "If I may say something, what I heard tonight was the most authentic music I've heard in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was real." Timothy sighed heavily. "Fine. Let's say we do this. What do we play? We don't have time to change a whole program." André smiled. "We play what we've always played. But this time with Garrett by my side." Pierce shook his head in disbelief. "This is madness, pure madness." "Maybe," André said, "but it's the right madness." He turned to the team. "Prepare the stage. We continue in 10 minutes." As everyone hastily left the room, Garrett remained behind. "André, why are you doing this? You're risking everything for me." André looked straight at him. "Because you once saved my life, and now it's my turn." Garrett's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," André answered. "Just let the music speak." They walked back to the stage together. The audience was restless, uncertain about what would come. But when André and Garrett appeared, there was an expectant silence. André took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but tonight you are witnessing something unique. This man beside me is Garrett Millfield, one of the greatest violinists America has ever known. And tonight we play together." The audience began to applaud. First hesitant, then enthusiastic. Garrett stepped forward, the violin in his hands. He looked at André, who nodded encouragingly. Together they began to play. The music filled Millennium Park, echoing through the streets of Chicago. It was imperfect, rough at the edges, but filled with an emotion that surpassed perfection. While playing, Garrett felt something change. The pain that had haunted him began to disappear. Every note was a liberation, every chord a healing. The audience listened breathlessly. Some cried, others smiled, but everyone felt the power of the moment. When the song ended, the audience stood in a standing ovation. Garrett couldn't hold back his tears. André embraced him on stage. "Welcome home, Garrett, welcome home." The applause continued for minutes. Garrett stood on the stage, overwhelmed by the audience's reaction. He hadn't felt so much warmth in 32 years, but behind the scenes not everyone was happy. Timothy stood with his phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of tension. "Yes, Mr. Director, I understand. No, it wasn't planned. Yes, I'll figure it out." He hung up and looked angrily at Pierce. "Headquarters is furious. They demand an explanation for what happened." Pierce rubbed his forehead. "What should I say? That my father changed his own rules in the middle of a live broadcast?" "Exactly that," Timothy said. "And if we don't give a good reason, this could cost him his career." On stage, André began the next song. Garrett played along, his hands moving with a skill that seemed to grow with every note. Mrs. Melody watched, fascinated. "He's amazing," she whispered to her neighbor. "Who is he really?" "I heard he was once famous," the neighbor answered. "But there was an incident, something with a fire." Mrs. Melody frowned. "A fire? What kind of fire?" Before the neighbor could answer, André suddenly interrupted the song. "One moment, please," he said into the microphone. The audience fell silent. André turned to Garrett. "I think it's time to tell them the truth." Garrett paled. "André, no, please. They deserve to know," André said softly. "And you deserve to tell your story." Garrett hesitated. His hands trembled again. André put an encouraging hand on his shoulder. "Trust me." Garrett nodded slowly. André gave him the microphone. "Good evening," Garrett began, his voice uncertain. "My name is Garrett Millfield. For those who don't know me, I was once a violinist, just like André. We studied together, played together." The audience listened attentively. "But 32 years ago, something happened that changed my life. There was a fire in a theater where we were supposed to play. My wife Rebecca and my daughter Emma were there. They didn't survive." Shocked whispers went through the crowd. Garrett swallowed hard. "After that night, I couldn't play anymore. Every time I touched a violin, I heard their voices. So I disappeared. I thought if I left, the pain would stop." His voice broke. But the pain didn't stop. It followed me everywhere. I lived on the streets, played in corners, tried to survive. And through all those years, there was one thing that kept me alive. The promise André and I had made. André stepped forward. We had promised to play Sunrise in Your Eyes together when the time was right. But when Garrett disappeared, I thought it would never happen. Garrett wiped away his tears. "I didn't come tonight for fame or sympathy. I came to keep that promise, to honor my wife and daughter with the music we had written together." The audience was silent. Many cried openly. A woman in the front row stood up. "Welcome home, Garrett," she called. The words were picked up, spreading through the crowd like a wave. "Welcome home. Welcome home." Garrett couldn't believe it. After 32 years of shame and grief, he was finally being accepted. André embraced him again. "You're no longer alone, my friend." Behind the scenes, Timothy looked at the screen, his anger disappearing. Maybe I was wrong," he mumbled to Pierce. Pierce nodded. "I think we all were." On stage, André began the last song of the evening, "Sunrise in Your Eyes," the full version. Garrett played along, his heart full, his mind finally at peace. The music floated through the air, touching every person in the audience. It was more than a concert. It was a moment of collective healing. When the last note faded, the audience remained silent. Then it burst into the loudest applause of the evening. Garrett knelt, overwhelmed by emotion. André knelt beside him. "You did it," André said. "You kept your promise." Garrett looked up, his face wet with tears. "No, André, we did it. Together." The audience kept applauding for minutes. It was a moment no one would ever forget. Later that evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the stage was empty, André and Garrett sat together in the dressing room. "What are you going to do now?" André asked. Garrett shrugged. "I don't know. I have no home, no job." André smiled. "Then you make one. Come join my orchestra. We can always use a talented violinist." Garrett stared at him. "Do you mean that?" "Absolutely. You proved tonight that you're still one of the best." Garrett shook his head in disbelief. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," André answered simply. Garrett smiled. For the first time in years, a real smile. "Yes, yes, I'd like that very much." They shook hands. A new beginning sealed in that small dressing room. Outside, Chicago began to sleep. But the story of that evening would keep the city awake for a long time. The story of two men who waited 32 years to keep a promise and an audience that witnessed a miracle. The following morning, the story was on every news site in America. Headlines screamed, "Maestro interrupts concert for disappeared friend. 32-year wait ends in tears at Millennium Park." Garrett Millfield, from street musician to orchestra member. In the hotel where André always stayed during his Chicago concerts, Garrett sat in the lobby, still amazed by everything that had happened. He wore clean clothes that André had bought for him, and for the first time in years, he felt like a human being. Pierce came in with a stack of newspapers. "You're everywhere," he said, throwing the newspapers on the table. "The whole country is talking about you two." Garrett picked up a newspaper and read the article. His photo was on the front page next to André on stage. "Is this real?" he mumbled. "Or am I still dreaming?" Pierce sat down. "It's real, and it's caused quite a few complications." Garrett looked up, concerned. "What kind of complications?" "Headquarters isn't happy. They say what my father did was unprofessional. They're even considering canceling some contracts." Garrett stood up abruptly. "No, that can't be. This is my fault. I should never have—" "Calm down," Pierce interrupted him. "My father knows what he did, and honestly, I think he was right." Garrett looked at him in surprise. "Really?" Pierce nodded. "Last night I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Real emotion. Not rehearsed, not planned, just real. And that's what people want to see." At that moment, André came into the lobby, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I understand your concerns. No, it wasn't unplanned. Well, technically it was. But listen, Mr. Director, sometimes you have to follow your heart, not just your contracts." He hung up and sighed. "They're still angry, but they'll come around." Garrett stepped forward. "André, this isn't fair to you. I've endangered your career." "You saved my career," André interrupted him. "Last night you reminded me why I became a musician in the first place, not for money or fame, but for this." He pointed to his heart. "For the connection that music creates." Mrs. Melody came in, her violin case in hand. "Maestro, the orchestra would like to know what the plans are. Do we have a concert tonight?" André looked at Garrett. "That depends on my new first violinist." Garrett's eyes widened. "First violinist? André, I can't. I haven't played with a full orchestra in 32 years." "Then it's time to start," André said firmly. "We have another concert tonight and you're playing with us." Mrs. Melody smiled. "The orchestra will be happy to hear that. Last night they were all very moved." She handed Garrett a folder. "These are the scores for tonight. I copied them for you." Garrett took the folder, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," Mrs. Melody answered. "Let your violin speak." That afternoon the orchestra rehearsed in the concert hall. Garrett stood next to André, his violin in hand, nervous but determined. "All right," André said, raising his conductor's baton. "Let's start with Mozart's Serenade No. 13. The orchestra began to play. Garrett followed, first hesitant, then with growing confidence. The music flowed from his violin, each note purer than the last. When the piece ended, the orchestra applauded spontaneously. Garrett looked up in surprise. "Why are you applauding?" he asked. "Because you're brilliant," Mrs. Melody answered. "We are honored to play with you." Garrett felt tears prickling. After 32 years of rejection and loneliness, he was finally being accepted. That evening the concert hall was sold out. People had come to see Garrett again, to witness his resurrection. When he came on stage next to André, the audience stood in a standing ovation. Garrett bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," André began, "tonight we're not just playing for our pleasure, but to celebrate something rare and precious, the power of second chances." The concert was masterful. Garrett played with a passion and skill that defied years of silence. Every song was a victory, every chord an affirmation of his return. During the last song, "Sunrise in Your Eyes," the entire audience stood. The music floated through the hall, touching every heart, healing old wounds. When the last note faded, the silence hung as if no one wanted the moment to end. Then the applause burst forth, louder than ever before. Garrett and André embraced each other on stage, both crying with joy. "You did it," André whispered. "You're back." "No," Garrett answered. "We did it. Together." Later that evening, when the crowd had gone and the lights were dimmed, Garrett and André sat in the empty hall. "What now?" Garrett asked. André smiled. "Now we tour together, as partners." Garrett looked at him in disbelief. "Really? Really? The world deserves to hear you." Garrett shook his head, a smile on his face. 32 years. "I waited 32 years for this moment. And it was worth it," André said. "Every second." They sat in silence, two old friends reunited, their music a bridge over years of pain and loss. The weeks after the concert were a whirlwind. The story of Garrett and André spread around the world. News programs wanted interviews, music festivals invited them, and fans flocked to their concerts. Garrett stood in his new apartment, a small but cozy place André had arranged, and looked out the window at the streets of Chicago. It felt surreal. A month ago, he was still living on the street, hoping for some spare change. Now, he was a celebrated musician. He walked to the mirror and looked at his reflection. The man looking back was different from the one he remembered. His hair was cut, his beard trimmed, and his eyes had a shine that had been missing for 32 years. But it was the hands that struck him most. The same hands that once danced perfectly over the strings, now marked by years of hardship, but ready to play again. On the table lay stacks of letters from fans from all over America and beyond. He picked one at random and began to read. "Dear Mr. Millfield, your story touched me deeply. I lost my husband 2 years ago and thought my life was over. But when I saw you play, I realized healing is possible. Thank you for your courage." Garrett felt his throat tighten. He had never thought his pain could help others. The phone rang. It was André. "Good morning, Garrett. Are you ready for today?" "For what?" Garrett asked. "We have an interview with a major TV program. They want to hear our story." Garrett hesitated. "André, I don't know if I'm ready for so much attention." "You're more than ready," André interrupted him. "This is your moment to shine." An hour later, Garrett sat in a car on the way to the studio. Pierce sat next to him going through notes. "The presenter is called Sarah Mitchell," Pierce explained. "She's known for her empathetic interviews. You don't need to worry, she'll be respectful." "I'm not worried about questions," Garrett said quietly. "I'm worried I won't find the right words." Pierce looked at him. "You don't need to find perfect words. You just need to be honest." In the studio, the atmosphere was professional but warm. Staff greeted Garrett with respect. Some even asked for autographs. It was strange. A month ago, people ignored him on the street. Now they treated him like a celebrity. Sarah Mitchell came forward, a friendly woman around 50 with intelligent eyes. "Mr. Millfield, what an honor to meet you. Your concert at Millennium Park touched my heart." "Thank you," Garrett said shyly. "It touched mine too." Later that day, they sat in a television studio before millions of viewers. The presenter, a friendly woman named Sarah, smiled warmly at them. "Mr. Rieu, Mr. Millfield, thank you for being here. Your story has touched the entire country. Can you tell us, Garrett, how it feels to be back after 32 years? Garrett thought for a moment before answering. "It feels like I woke up from a long nightmare. For 32 years I lived in the shadow of my grief. But André, he gave me the chance to stand in the light again." André shook his head. "No, Garrett, you gave yourself that chance. I just opened the door. Sarah leaned forward. "There's something many people are wondering. Why now? Why after 32 years did you decide to return?" Garrett looked at his hands. "Because I realized I couldn't keep running. My wife Rebecca and my daughter Emma, they wouldn't have wanted me to give up my life. They loved music, and by stopping playing, I betrayed their memory." He looked up, his eyes moist. "So I came back to keep the promise André and I had made, and to prove to myself that I could still live." Sarah nodded understandingly and turned to André. "Mr. Rieu, what went through your mind when you saw Garrett after 32 years? André leaned back, his gaze far away. "Honestly, my first thought was disbelief. I thought he was gone, like so many others we had lost. But when I saw his eyes, I knew it was him. The same passion, the same intensity I remembered." "And were you afraid to let him on stage?" Sarah asked. "Afraid?" André smiled. "No, I was excited. This was a chance to show something real, not just perfect music, but human emotion." The interview lasted an hour, and at the end there were few dry eyes in the studio. When the cameras turned off, several crew members came to Garrett to thank him personally. "My grandmother has Alzheimer's," said a young cameraman. "She doesn't recognize me anymore. But when I play music for her, I see something awaken in her eyes. Your story reminded me why I have to keep trying." Garrett embraced him. No words needed. In the months that followed, Garrett toured with André's orchestra across America and beyond. Every concert was sold out, every performance a success. But more than the fame, more than the money, it was the connection with the audience that Garrett valued. In Los Angeles, they played at the Disney Concert Hall for 2,000 people. Garrett stood on stage and felt the same nervousness as 32 years ago at his first big concert. But this time he had André beside him. "Ready?" André whispered. "Ready," Garrett answered. The music began and Garrett lost himself in it. Every song was a journey, every chord a memory. He played for Rebecca and Emma, but also for himself, for the man he had been and the man he had become. After the concert in Los Angeles, they went to New York, then Boston, then Philadelphia. Everywhere they played, enthusiastic fans waited, but it was in Detroit, his hometown, that Garrett had the most emotional experience. One evening after a concert at the Detroit Symphony Orchestra Hall, Garrett was approached by a young woman. "Mr. Millfield," she said shyly, "I just wanted to say your music helped me. I lost my brother last year and thought I'd never get over the pain. But when I saw you play, I realized healing is possible." Garrett felt tears welling up. "Thank you," he said softly. "That means more to me than you know." The woman gave him an envelope. "This is a letter I wrote for you. Read it when you have time." Later that evening in his hotel room, Garrett opened the envelope. The letter was long and detailed, telling about her loss, her pain, and how his music had helped her find hope again. At the end was a sentence that touched him. "You taught me that it's okay to be sad, but that I don't have to live in my sadness." Garrett carefully folded the letter and put it with the other letters he had received. Each letter was a reminder that his journey was not only for him, but for everyone who had suffered pain. Later that evening, he sat with André in their hotel room. "I think I finally understand why all this happened," Garrett said. "Why?" André asked. "Because it wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who suffers, who thinks they can't recover. By sharing my story, I give them hope." André smiled. "That's the most beautiful gift music can give." They sat in silence, two friends who had made a journey together from grief to joy. But there was still one thing Garrett wanted to do. The next morning, he told André about his plan. "I want to organize a concert in honor of Rebecca and Emma. Not for money or fame, but to celebrate their memory." André nodded understandingly. "Where do you want to hold it?" "In the theater where they went before the fire. It's been rebuilt, and I think it would be the perfect place." André put a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll make something special of it, something that would make them proud." In the weeks that followed, Garrett and André worked together on the special concert. Garrett expanded Sunrise in Your Eyes, adding new movements and transforming it from a simple melody to a full symphony. Mrs. Melody helped with the orchestral parts. Pierce coordinated the logistics, and Timothy made sure everything was perfectly arranged. "This will be the most important concert of your career," Timothy said to Garrett during a rehearsal. "No," Garrett corrected. "This will be the most important moment of my life." 1 month later, Garrett stood on the stage of the rebuilt Riverside Theater in his hometown of Portland, Oregon, before an audience consisting mainly of family and friends of Rebecca and Emma. He had specially expanded Sunrise in Your Eyes, adding a full symphony to honor their lives. When he began to play, he felt their presence. It was as if they stood next to him, encouraging him. The music filled the theater, every note a tribute to the love he had lost, but would never forget. He played with his eyes closed, imagining Rebecca in the front row, smiling as she always did. He imagined Emma, her small hands clapping with joy. The symphony built crescendo after crescendo until it reached an emotional peak. Garrett opened his eyes and saw that the entire audience was crying. Some held each other's hands, others had their eyes closed, lost in the music. At the end, the audience stood, tears flowing freely. Garrett bowed deeply, his heart full of gratitude. André came forward and embraced him. "They would have been so proud of you," he whispered. "I hope so," Garrett answered. Later that evening, when the theater was empty, Garrett stood alone on the stage. He looked at the empty seats and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered into the silence, "for everything." He felt a peace he hadn't felt in 32 years. It wasn't the end of his grief, but the beginning of a new chapter. In the years that followed, Garrett became a permanent fixture in André's orchestra. They toured all over the world, their music touching millions of hearts. But for Garrett, it wasn't the fame or success that mattered. It was knowing that he had kept his promise, that he had honored his wife and daughter, and that he had finally found peace. And every time he played Sunrise in Your Eyes, he felt them with him, their love eternally captured in the music. Years later, when someone asked Garrett what the most important moment of his life had been, he answered without hesitation, "The evening I returned to Millennium Park, not because I became famous, but because I found myself again." And that, ultimately, was all that mattered. The story of Garrett Millfield and André Rieu became a legend in America. It became a symbol of hope, of second chances, and of the power of music to heal even the deepest wounds. And to this day, when people hear Sunrise in Your Eyes, they remember that evening at Millennium Park. The evening a man waited 32 years to keep his promise, and an entire nation cried with joy. Because sometimes waiting is worth it. Sometimes the path to reconciliation is long and painful, but in the end, when the music plays and hearts open, it's all worth it. Garrett Millfield had learned that the hard way, but he had learned it, and his story would live on forever. A reminder that it's never too late to come back, to heal, and to start again. The sun set over Chicago, golden light dancing over the old streets. In the distance, a street musician played a violin, the melody floating on the wind. It was Sunrise in Your Eyes, and everyone who heard it stopped for a moment, smiled, and remembered. Remembered that hope never dies, remembered that music is eternal, remembered that love lives on, even in loss. The symphony of redemption had played its final note, but its echo would resonate through countless hearts for generations to come. In coffee shops across America, people would share this story with friends. In music schools, teachers would tell their students about the power of perseverance. In homes where families gathered, children would learn that sometimes the most beautiful melodies come from the deepest pain. Garrett's journey had become more than just his own healing. It had become a beacon of light for anyone who had ever felt lost, abandoned, or forgotten. The music industry itself was changed by what happened that night in Chicago. Record labels began looking not just for technical perfection, but for authentic emotion. Concert halls started featuring stories of redemption alongside their performances. Music therapy programs expanded, recognizing the profound healing power that Garrett and André had demonstrated on that stage. The ripple effects of one man's courage to return and another man's willingness to embrace him spread far beyond anything they could have imagined. And in the quiet moments between concerts, when Garrett would sit alone with his violin, he would sometimes hear other voices joining Rebecca and Emma's, the voices of everyone whose lives had been touched by their story, everyone who had found their own courage to face another day, to pick up their own broken dreams and try again. The music had become a bridge, not just across time, but across the shared human experience of loss, hope, and the eternal possibility of renewal.